So hello and welcome to our NISCC webinar series. We're delighted today to be joined by Marian O'Rourke, who's going to be talking to us about the review and reform of the Northern Ireland post-qualifying framework. But first, I just wanted to give you a few details about the webinar series. Details of what we're doing can be found on the NISCC section of the BASWA website. And upcoming speakers we have in the next couple of months are John Devaney from Queen's University in Belfast, Marcella Leonard from PANI, and Paula McFadden is going to be sharing with us her just about to be published doctoral research. And don't forget, these webinars can be used as part of your continuous professional development. What you need to do is, when you've listened to them, discuss them with your line manager in supervision and get them signed off. We're always interested in anything that in particular that you would like us to cover. So if you have any requests for particular speakers or particular topics, please get in contact with me. My email address is a.mcallister@baswa.co.uk. So without further ado, I'm delighted to be able to introduce our speaker today. Marian O'Rourke is one of the professional advisors at the Northern Ireland Social Care Council. As she and I chatted today, she was a bit surprised to learn that she's actually been a social worker for 29 years now and been involved in the social work profession. For the last 13 years, Marian has been very heavily involved with post-qualifying, and any of us who've done any post-qualifying training in education will all know Marian, and she has a history of previously being with probation. So without further ado, I'm delighted to hand over to Marian.
Thank you very much, Anne. So welcome everyone to the webinar on the review of the PQ framework and our emerging programme of reform. As Anne said, my name is Marian O'Rourke and I'm the lead advisor in NISCC for post-qualifying education and training. And I've worked in the PQ world for a number of years now and have led on the recent review of the framework. I'm assuming that if you have selected to watch this presentation, you will already know something about the framework, but just in case you don't, I'll give you a very quick explanation. As the regulator of social work education and training, NISCC is the awarding body for the PQ framework in Northern Ireland. The framework provides a number of certificated professional awards that social workers can achieve across the continuum of their career. Having led the review of the framework, I am now responsible for coordinating the implementation of the recommendations, and in this presentation I want to talk to you about some of the findings and outcomes of the review, but also more importantly to give you some information on how we plan to take this work forward through a programme of formal reform. The presentation will last about 20 minutes, I think, and will provide you with some contact details at the end should you wish to make any comment. We would be delighted to hear from you, and I will tell you a little later why your contribution is important. So, let's begin with some background as to how we got to where we are now. One of the disadvantages of the webinar is that I can't see the age range of my audience, but let's assume that a little context is helpful for everyone. Whilst the profession of social work has evolved and developed over many years, it is only within a relatively recent period, in fact just over 20 years, that we have had a professional framework for education and training at post-qualifying level. When I qualified in 1984, I was struck by a sense of, is this it? Am I not expected or required to have any further qualifications? It has only been from 1991 onwards that we have had a framework of awards that recognise standards of professional competence. Now, Northern Ireland has always been at the forefront of developments in post-qualifying training. We had the first of the UK PQ awards at both post-qualifying and advanced award levels, and we were the most successful region in the UK in achieving awards throughout the lifetime of the UK framework. But the world of social work has changed considerably over the past number of years. The title of social worker is now protected by legislation, and as a regulated profession we are required to progress our learning and professional development, and so we have the PRTL requirements, the post-registration training and learning, and as you know, NISCC uses an audit model as the means of regulating this. So when we developed the Northern Ireland PQ framework and launched it in April 2007, we were conscious of the need to see it as an evolving and developing framework. And so 5 years later, it's time to take a look at how it is working. We set out to review the framework to ensure that it remains fit for the purpose of meeting the professional development needs of its users. And the users of the framework are you, the social worker. Whether you are newly qualified and have just completed your assessed year in employment, or you are qualified for as long as I have been, or even longer, and you need to keep up to date and want your knowledge base to be as good as it can be. It is for those of you in any social work setting, even if it is not described as social in terms of social work. Justice settings, education welfare setting, research settings, wherever social workers are working, using their professional qualification, not just in practice settings, but equally in management, training, some kind of leadership role, in other words, across the continuum of the career in social work. So as you may know, we spent the last year going out and about and talking to lots of people, well over 300 in fact. Not all of them social workers, but all with a view as to whether the PQ framework delivered what it said it would. We wanted to know how to do things differently and better. We need to know what works for social workers and their employers, and more importantly, what doesn't work. That's the beauty of having a framework that is for Northern Ireland. We are able to adapt and respond to changing need. And even in this short time span of 5 years, that need had significantly changed. Social workers were working in different organisational contexts and structures. Wide-ranging policy developments had taken place and continue to do so. The publication of the review report coincided with the publication of the Department's strategy for social work. The strategy sets out a range of priorities linked to 3 interdependent themes: strengthening the capacity of the workforce, improving social work services, and building trust, leadership and trust in the profession. Achievement and recognition within the PQ framework needs to support the realisation of these themes. So what did we find? Well, I'm not going to take you through the very extensive range of findings in any great detail. You can look at those in the review report for yourself. But I have picked out a few highlights for you. The review report provides you with much more detail, and I will direct you to it at the end of the presentation. But as you can see, we got some very important messages about the overall context of the framework and what it needs to do for the profession as a whole. And much of the findings fit with the direction of travel that the social work strategy outlined for us, so that at least is reassuring. Alongside this, we got some very detailed messages that told us about the specific mechanics of the framework, what worked well and what needs reform. The broad basis of what we find was that in essence, the framework is good. It is at the right level, it has the right breadth, and it has the means to be flexible. But it is not being used to its maximum potential. Possibly because in trying to be flexible, it is complicated. It is not making links with places where most training and development happens, in the workplace, in in-service training. It is high quality, but for the relative few rather than for the majority, and there are some gaps in the range of provision. I suppose really the combination of the findings can be summed up as needing to move towards a position whereby learning and development is driven by the needs of the job and is regarded as central to the job as any other aspect of service delivery. Recognition for that learning needs to be easy to access and must provide some added value for the employer as well as for the individual. So if we want the framework to be fit for purpose and able to give the recognition of professional standards to the training and development that social workers are undertaking, then we need to make changes. As you will see, some of the changes are for the immediate term and some are longer term, involving changing culture as well as structure. So let's look at the recommendations briefly. The report outlines a range of recommendations. Some are aimed at NISCC, some are for the commissioners and employers, others are for registrants, and some are joint responsibility that will require collaboration. In fact, all will probably require collaboration and working in partnership, and that will play to our strengths in Northern Ireland. We have a strong history of partnership working. It has only been through the commitment of partner agencies that we have achieved what is in place, and this will continue to be the model of engagement. So let's briefly look at what is being asked of NISCC. I would be interested to know, what do you think of the idea to rename the framework the Northern Ireland Professional Development Framework for Social Work? The thinking here is that PQ has been regarded as something that is extra on top of the day job, only relevant to some, whereas what people want is for professional development to be recognised as integral to the day job. Achievement within the framework is about helping social workers to do the job that they have to do, and about using the framework as a quality benchmark of what is required. So maybe what we're looking for is more emphasis on professional development rather than post-qualifying, as it maybe gives a different context. We need to work together to promote the framework in a way that is easily understood and easy to access. This will mean looking at the mechanics of gaining recognition and having the right information systems in place that will support a more joined up approach. We all know that professional development improves the quality of practice. We also know that the investment in training, both in terms of financial cost, the time commitment, the pressure on workloads, etc., all of this is under intense scrutiny as managers try to make decisions on priorities. Commissioners and employers must be able to see what they get from such investment, and one of the outcomes that they need to get is improvement, better practice, safer and more effective. Professional development that is assessed and can be benchmarked against a recognised standard provides assurance in governance terms. We need to be better at getting best value for what we are already doing. Social workers want and need learning opportunities to develop their professional practice. That said, how many of us make this an important part of our job? Some of you may have attended the recent NISCC conference on leading in challenging times. The conference looked at leadership from a range of different perspectives, and one of the workshops looked at knowledge leadership. It was delivered by Brian Taylor from the University of Ulster and Stan Houston from Queen's. And Brian made a statement that stayed with me, something that made me think, and that it is so true, and we need to hear it being said much louder. What he said was this. He was talking about why we need knowledge. He said, vulnerable people have the right not to be the victims of untested and possibly harmful interventions, however well intentioned. I'll say that again for you. Vulnerable people have the right not to be the victims of untested and possibly harmful interventions, however well intentioned. So as social workers, we have a responsibility to rely on more than good intentions and old knowledge. We have a responsibility to keep our knowledge and therefore our practice up to date. Another quote from the conference that I loved was something that Neil Thompson said in his keynote address. He was talking about effective leaders. And what he said was that effective leaders look to get the best out of people, not the most out of them. Effective leaders look to get the best out of people, not the most out of them. I think that's a good question to ask of ourselves and of our leaders. Are we looking for the best or the most? Now, the need for links between post-qualifying development, formal achievement, qualifications and career progression has been a consistent theme. As the PQ culture has developed over the years, the body of staff with qualifications and formal achievement beyond initial qualification has grown significantly. There is now a basis on which to begin to require qualifications for particular posts, and that already happens for some posts. For example, our approved social workers, our practice teachers. The PSS development and training strategy also requires some formal achievement within the framework for newly qualified social workers and for senior and principal practitioners, as well as relevant training that may or may not come from within the PQ framework for managers. So the next stage is to look at developing the framework to support career progression in a much wider context. As career structures become more refined within organisations, we need to make sure that the framework adds value for those seeking progression. So where do the recommendations take us? Well, there is a shared commitment to the need for reform and development of the framework. Collaboration will be the key to the success of this. There are windows of opportunities that suggest that reform of the professional framework is timely. The implementation of the social work strategy will provide opportunity to strengthen the role and position of social work, and therefore provide a focus for the need for a robust and responsive professional development framework that will support the profession. The implementation of Transforming Your Care will provide opportunity for the role and function of social work, particularly around adult services, to come to the fore, and the need for relevant and quality professional development that will equip social workers to be part of new ways of working will become evident. Some of what needs to happen is in terms of the operational delivery of the PQ framework, in terms of what is in the framework, how is it promoted and used. This needs to happen quickly, or at least to start to happen in the immediate term. And I'll show you some examples of where this is already happening. Some of what needs to happen in terms of the strategic direction for the framework, in terms of culture and the links with employment structures, these will undoubtedly take longer to see movement here. So to make sure that change does happen, NISCC has established a steering group to develop and oversee the programme of reform. The steering group is chaired by the Director of Regulation and Standards at NISCC and has representation from the Department, the Health and Social Care Board, the PQ Partnership, employers in the statutory and voluntary sector, users and carers, and social work registrants. The group are in the process of signing off a strategic implementation plan that sets the priorities for reform and development of the framework. There is an extensive programme of work already underway with key stakeholders, and we are beginning to communicate some of the progress that is being made. For example, this webinar being one of the new ways in which we are trying to engage with social workers. And if we find that this has been useful, we will certainly look to use webinars in other ways in NISCC and in bringing about the change within the PQ framework. So what are the strategic priorities? Well, the priorities for the programme of reform very much reflect and map across to the recommendations of the review, as well as taking account of current priorities for the DHSSPS, the Commissioner and employers. The Strategic Implementation Plan allows for joined-up thinking across areas of development. And it will be critical that the pace of change within the programme of reform takes account of other change processes and, where appropriate, works alongside these related processes. This will be particularly important when considering how to support governance frameworks and career pathways. So, what's happening? The steering group has begun its planning and much work is underway within the operational plan. The work is undertaken by NISCC advisors along with members of the partnership, the employers and the academic providers. And the programme of reform will only be successful when delivered in partnership. Really interesting work is happening within the in-service programmes. We are wanting to provide as much opportunity as possible for any of the more substantive programmes or clusters of small groups to look for ways of developing a submission to the individual assessment route. We have some pilots underway and hopefully this will prove to be popular. It is so important that social workers get recognition for their investment in learning and that their employers are able to stand over the quality and impact of learning in this context. Work is also underway on rebranding the promotion of PQ opportunities. And you'll see some of these changes through the NIST website and in promotional materials available through your training departments. And hopefully you'll see that there is a greater emphasis on starting from the perspective of practice pathways and career development. So what progress have we made? Well, as you can see, there is much work ongoing. One of the pieces of work that has been completed has been a mapping of the PQ framework to the revised National Occupational Standards for Social Work, the NOS. And these are the standards that are used for social work in Northern Ireland, Wales and in Scotland. We've also mapped the PQ framework to the Professional Capabilities Framework, the PCF, which sets the standards for social work in England. And finally, we mapped across to the NHS Leadership Framework, which is a framework used across the health and social care sector to set domains for leadership. And I have to say it's reassuring to see that the PQ framework sits very well in these contexts, and that whilst there are some variations in emphasis across all of the frameworks, there are no major gaps. Another area of development that I would like to draw your attention to is the development of an integrated IT system. NISCC currently has two database systems, one that records registration and conduct information and one that records PQ information. We are in the process of bringing the two systems together, and this will mean that we will be able to report on information about PQ across the social work workforce. This will allow for information to be fed into systems that plan for where training should be focused, what priorities need to be made, and will give us a better profile of what the workforce looks like. A third area that you might be interested in hearing about is our work around developing better ways of evaluating the impact of PQ training and achievement, looking at what difference does it make to practice and to service outcomes. So trying to build a before and after picture. I would hope that many of you will have some links already to the developments and reform work that I've been talking about. But if not, and if you have a particular interest and want to get involved, then make sure you make contact with us. So as I have said, if you want to get involved, please do. The PQ Partnership is your connection into NISCC. So through your PQ rep in your training department or through your organisation rep on the PQ Partnership, you can be connected. Thank you so much for listening. I hope you found the session useful in terms of introducing you or updating you on the changes that are taking place in PQ training. Myself or any one of my colleagues, Jan or Brenda, would be delighted to hear from you if you have any queries or you want further information. If you are interested in looking in more detail at the review report and a position paper that was produced as an annex to the report, you will find it available for download on the NISCC website, www.niscc.info. Thank you for listening. Bye.
Thanks, Marian, and just on behalf of NIASWA, we really want to thank you for giving us your time and your expertise today. And for those of you listening, I'm sure like me, you found this presentation very useful. As an ex-trainer, I was particularly interested in looking at developing links between PQ and in-service programs. I think that will be a great step forward. So as Marian has said, if you would like to get involved with the PQ review, make contact with her or her colleagues. And on behalf of NIASWA, we look forward to connecting with you through future webinar series.